Good morning, everyone. My name's Simon. I'm a product developer here at Frog Hop. This morning's guest is Leah Brown. She's co-founder and operations director of Origin Kitchen. Starting from the kitchen table as a family-run company, Origin Kitchen uses cashews to create naturally healthy, delicious plant-based spreads and desserts. We've worked with them to ensure their products retain nutrition, goodness, and taste. The business has scaled up its production to a commercial kitchen setup while maintaining a passion for experimental home cooking and staying free from artificial ingredients. Leah's going to tell us about how the business started and scaled and how they've recently made their manufacturing service available to other producers. There'll be some time for questions at the end, so please feel free to pop any questions in the chat or unmute towards the end and we can welcome any questions. Welcome to the webinar, Leah.
Hi, thank you very much for having me.
No problem. Cool. So I thought we'd start with kind of the beginning. So what were you doing before you founded Origin Kitchen, and had you always wanted to start your own food business?
Okay, so in fact, I've had two careers before I started Origin Kitchen. More recently, I was working in a really unrelated industry. I was working as sales and marketing in education, mainly in universities. So even though it's not related to food or the business, it's a very commercial environment, so that was quite helpful. But my first career was actually in hospitality, and I was a chef and worked in various restaurants and catering. And then in the early 90s, I set up a corporate and events catering business, which I ran for a few years. So that gave me, my first sort of try of running a business, actually. So going back to working in food is something I always wanted to do, really. So this time different in that we're making products to sell.
Oh, cool. So where did the idea for Origin Kitchen come from, and how did it kind of all kick off and come about in the beginning?
Okay, so in about 2018, as a family, we went vegan. My youngest son then became vegan first. And even though that wasn't very long ago, things have moved massively in that time. But, in 2018, the range of plant-based foods available, prepared foods, was much more limited than it is now. And there were two things that we really noticed. Number one, in the dairy space, there's plenty of milks and nice milks. There's cheeses, but there weren't dairy products that give you that lovely mouthfeel that double cream delivers. So that was a point of interest. But the other thing was lots of the products that were available were highly processed and felt more like science experiments than natural food. And as a family, natural, good tasting, healthy food was really important. And that's what we wanted to be making for people. So that's really where it started from. Then on a more sort of granular level, our first product, which is a savoury spread, where I said I was working universities and taking my lunch to work, and I was heartily sick of either a hummus or a falafel sandwich. So I was like, give me a sandwich spread. So that was kind of like the kickoff. Well, let's make one, shall we? And then sell it to others.
Awesome. Did you start that from your own kitchen at home, or?
Yeah, we did. So as I said, I work with my two sons, Ben and Sam, and Ben actually was the person who did the started the hands-on. So he was making the products at home in the kitchen, and initially we kicked off with going to markets in North London. The timing wasn't great because it was around the same time as COVID started, so that limited the opportunity to sort of expand into other markets. So from there, we then, my eldest son then kicked off the drive to then get into sort of retail by going to small independent shops in North London. So that's really how we started.
Okay, perfect. Very interesting. What were the kind of first steps in developing the range? What products did you start with, and what were the main challenges in bringing them from concepts through to launch?
So in fact, for our first range, so both our savoury spreads and our desserts, so made on the same base, which is cashew cream. And many vegans would have made cashew cream at home or sort of know about it. It's something that people make at home. So that's where we started. But actually, it took, to be honest, around 18 months to refine from the first sort of attempts at making something, a savory spread with on that creamy cashew base, to the product that we have now. And that's really because it's one thing to make something small at home, and for that to sort of work and be stable enough to sell it, you know, in a market where it's going to be consumed within that week, to something that's, you know, got a 11-week shelf life, is, you know, completely stable, can be reproduced exactly the same, you know, every single time. So I would say that at each step there are different challenges. So the first sort of challenges was making a product that actually stuck together and, you know, was nice. And then as we scaled, then it was about how can we replicate that with the tools that we have, and then when we scaled again, you know, how could we keep that going? So that's one set of challenges, if you will. The other set of challenges was, one of the great things about going to markets is that you get immediate feedback from customers, and therefore it was about tweaking the recipes, tweaking the flavors. So all of our recipes have been tweaked, some radically, since inception. But there's nothing like speaking to people and giving them taste and hearing what they've got to say. And quite honestly, you know, if somebody's tasted your product and then pulls out their wallet and buys it, then yes, you're doing something right. It's really important to try to put your product out there in that sort of live environment.
Yeah, that sounds great. So in terms of kind of adding new products into the range, how do you go about that? Do you still kind of do the smaller testing first and then refine the concepts to then introduce to the range and scale?
Yes, so our second range is a range of dessert style mousses made on the same cream cashew base. So in fact, developing the products with that was much easier because we knew it wanted to be on the cashew base. And in fact, they're simpler products to make because the other ingredients aren't cooked, that they're simply blended. So with that, it was about refining the flavors and getting the balance right of the ingredients, and also finding flavors which were familiar enough but interesting. So here's sort of a bit of a sidebar which relates to both. What we've found is, particularly if you're a new brand and a new product, the flavors have to be familiar enough for people to take a punt on. If you've got a new product and an out there sort of flavor, we call them Buddha's breath type flavors, I think, which are just too wild and wacky. Some foodies will try it, particularly foodies with enough cash to sort of buy stuff that they might then find they don't like and, you know, it doesn't bother them. But for the average public, there's got to be enough that sounds familiar for people to have a trial with. So what we've ended up doing is make more familiar flavors, but just do a really brilliant job of them. And that's what sells. Now, in fact, one of our flavors on the spread, mushroom and dill, we're going to take the dill out and put a more traditional sort of French style herb base in. So the dill is more Scandinavian and Eastern European, and people who love it really love it. But for a British public, there's, you know, we get resistance at the market. People say, oh, I love mushrooms, but I don't like dill. And therefore, as much as I love it, it's got to go because it's just creating that barrier. And that's a really good example of they've got to be flavors that enough people will go for because they know they like that flavor.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, I think nostalgia, especially in plant-based, is quite a big trend. People want to take that step into plant-based, but then they also want something they're very comfortable with from the other side as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Great range of products. So who do you develop your new products for? Do you kind of find your end customer first and then develop ranges with briefs from them, or the other way around, do new product development and then pitch that into your existing customers?
So our first product, in all honesty, was exactly marketing 101, what you don't do, which is 1950s style, make something then try and sell it, because we wanted the product. But essentially, there is enough people interested in plant-based food for that to have worked. The challenge, and it is still a challenge that we need to manage. It doesn't fit fairly and squarely into many categories. So within plant-based, in some retailers, plant-based is ranged with the parent category, and some it's standalone, and that has created a little bit of a challenge for us on the spreads, because there isn't a category which is savory spreads. However, we're managing that because there's plenty of space in free from generally. So our second range is fairly and squarely. We went right, desserts. There is definitely a dessert shelf. There is definitely a gap for a healthy premium plant-based dessert, and that's where we're going to go. So that's kind of part of the real answer. The other part of the real answer is through that process, we're really clear about the segments in our audience. Number one is vegan, so that's kind of primary. And luckily for us, a number of fully vegan people is increasing across the UK. And at the moment, it's reckoned to be about 4.5% of the population, which has grown exponentially in the last 3 or 4 years. But also flexitarian, which is a much bigger range of people. Then you've got people who are just interested in natural, healthy eating, sort of lifestyle people. And then the fourth group, which we think about, are food lovers. So they're the 4 groups that we're thinking about. Generally, we're thinking about people in that younger age group, sort of 20s into mid 30s. But having said that, at markets, we certainly sell to people of all ages. So that's what we do keep in mind. And I think keeping those things in mind, keeping your target audience in mind, really helps to check back and make sure the brand is working. And that sounds easy to do and something that you'd read in a marketing textbook. And as an ex-marketer, I've certainly read that kind of thing in a textbook a lot. But actually doing it is harder than you'd think. But it's really important. Just keep checking back. Who's the audience? Will what we're doing translate? But most importantly, are we communicating that? I think that's the bit that's harder. It's one thing knowing your product would interest those people, but are you communicating that well enough? And we've had heaps of learnings across the last 2 years in refining that.
Cool. And in terms of your brand values, now you've got some really strong kind of core values. Is that something you've grown into, or did you kind of start the business with those values and then they've been present the whole way through the process?
We've always had those values. I think we haven't always communicated them as well as we wanted to. And that's what we're really focusing on, because I think one of the things we found, I'm sure it's the same for the other guys on the call, when you're starting a new business, you've got 40,000 things to think about and 100,000 fires to fight. And it's really hard while you're fighting the fires and doing the doing to keep focused on those bigger and important things. And honestly, it took us, I'd say 18 months to 2 years to find the space to come back round. And in fact, we're just in the processes of completely not just redoing our packaging, but renaming our range, because the name that we had, Cream Cashew, which we thought explained everything to everyone, explains nothing to nobody. And we have to pitch every single time, because people don't look at the product and immediately understand it, even though it says spread on the front and mousse on the front. There's still, what's this? So what we realized is, actually, don't try and describe what the product's made of, try and describe what the eating experience is. So now we're renaming both the ranges to So Creamy, because actually that's what people care about, because if they can't understand how they're going to enjoy it, they don't care what it's made for anyway. They're just going to walk past. So
yeah, that's really interesting. Cool. What is your approach to sales and sales channels? Where did you start and where are you currently selling, and what were the learnings along the way?
Okay, so if I start with our end goal and then work back, so our end goal, like I guess loads of people who work with you guys, is to be in the malts across the UK and then sort of roll out, across Europe and internationally. So with that in mind, it's about people going to a shop and buying the product. So we then first started that, my other son Sam started that in London by going to individual local shops in North London, which is where we lived, and selling directly to shops, which got us going. And then on the sort of back of that initial work, we then started approaching the health and health food distributors. So now in 2 years, we're now with the 5 major UK distributors, which is something we're quite proud of actually, because many people have said through COVID it was very, very hard to get a new listing, and we've managed to do that. And we think it's because the product is very different. And because we are able to, it's a chilled product, but we've got quite a long shelf life for a chilled product, which meant that the distributors were prepared to take the risk on it because the stores were prepared to take the risk on it. So it's been very important to us. So now, when we present ourselves to, the major, supermarkets and the like, we are able to say we're selling this many thousand units across the nation at this price point, which is probably higher than we would sell it at a supermarket anyway, because when you're working with a distributor, you have to put an extra margin in. And we just feel that builds a much more sort of credible story. We do sell a little bit online, but because it's a chilled product and it's packed in glass jars, it's fragile, it needs to be kept cold, and that costs quite a bit of money. And it's just not where our focus is. We'd rather push people to go to a retailer.
Yeah, that's great that you managed to get into all the big distributors. Do you have any tips for people on the call on kind of how to approach distributors or get kind of your first listings within them?
I think just persistence. We were our first distributor, the health store. Our product just appealed to the chill buyer, who could see it was different and could see that that was something that the market would want. And so once we got a listing with them, we then would contact other distributors and say, your customers are buying our products from X, or we were still doing directly at that point. And then once one distributor's got it, then the second one wants it. When 2 of them have it, then the third one wants it. And then, then it goes on from there. So we haven't found the distributors very hard to get into. The product, they have to see the value of the product essentially. Otherwise they won't list it. And particularly so with chilled, because the shelf space for chilled is very small, and independent shops is even smaller than in a supermarket. So if you're going to be on that shelf, you've got to sell. Otherwise, shops might give you a go once or twice, but they won't give you a go after that. So it's incredibly important that the product has legs and will stand on its own, and that people will cut. There'll be repeat buy.
Oh. If we just go on to kind of scaling up the business, if you could just tell us kind of how this worked, going from your kitchen table into a kind of production facility, and the challenges you found along the way because of that. Yeah,
so we did start at home, as you've said, but quite quickly when we were in London, we moved to a small unit within a complex called Definite Kitchens, which people on the call in London may have heard of. So they were relatively small production units, much bigger than a domestic kitchen, but still not very big. So we were with Daphne for about, 18 months probably. The challenge we had there was that the space was fairly limited, and therefore to expand we would have to take a whole nother unit, and then the cost was prohibitive. So the way we looked at it, every time we expanded, the landlord definitely would get richer and we would just remain the same, which wasn't really very attractive at all. Yeah. So we took this step of actually relocating the whole family to Nottingham. So now we're in the Midlands, and we're on a brilliant food park, which is actually council owned here in Nottingham, and we've got a proper little factory, which is fantastic. So now we have room to expand, because that was the other thing. There's no good going after the supermarkets if you're in this tiny little unit, and with the best will in the world, you're not going to be able to service them. Through the discussions we have had with supermarkets, we've had the opportunity, mainly through Bread and Jam, to have discussions with supermarkets. They don't want to hear about what you might be able to do in 12 months' time. They want to look at you now, and they want you to be supermarket ready now, even though it might take 12 months to kind of get on the shelves. So you have to be able to say, yes, we can deliver that. We've got the space, equipment, blah, 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 all of that kind of thing. And by being in Nottingham, now we do have that ability, really.
Perfect. Did you ever look into outsourcing the production at all?
Not seriously. We did once or twice, and one of the ways was coming to Mel's wonderful webinar and hearing about outsourcing opportunities. So we put our toe in the water a couple of times, but there was some good reasons why we didn't go ahead with that. Number one, because of my background, and my youngest son is also, a passionate foodie, Ben. We always wanted to make it ourselves. There's pleasure in making it yourself. So that was of interest. There are 3 of us in the team, so that's 3 sets of hands, that can work together to make the product. The product's relatively simple to make. So, once you've got the equipment and spent 2 years working out how to do it, of course, it's relatively simple. But the other thing is, we've been able to do all those developments ourselves and get the feedback from markets and do the tweaking because we were able to do it ourselves. So if we got some feedback literally on Saturday, we could be working on it on Monday. In the early days, it was that sort of simple. So that was really attractive. But the other thing is, commercially, nobody makes cream cashew. I mean, plenty of vegans are making it at home. So if we went to an external manufacturer, they would have to learn how to make it. Now, it's not hard to make, but they would expect volume. Yeah, for those reasons, it just made sense for us to do it ourselves. The challenge of that is it has required a capital investment, quite a substantial capital investment. So, it has been a punt. But as everyone on the call would probably, agree, you've got to back your idea. Otherwise, we think it's a good product. People seem to like it, and we're prepared to back it. So, that's the way we've done it. I think if it's ambient, it's different because you can go to a manufacturer and get, 3,000 or 4,000, units done in one thing, take them home, have them in your spare bedroom, and then slowly sell them while you're waiting. But with chilled, you just can't. It has to be little and often.
Yeah, for sure. All about supply and demand.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Cool. I also know that you offer contract manufacturing for other plant-based businesses, or recently started to do that. How did this come about, and what kind of products and producers are you looking to support going forward?
Yeah, so one of the good things about coming up to Nottingham and having this much bigger production space is that we have the space to work with other people. We've also are investing in a what can only be described of the Lamborghini of food manufacturing machines, which is they're called Robocubo. They're made in Italy. And what it will do is allow us to make our own product much, much faster, which means that we've got more time as well as more space. But the Robocubo can do a massive range of different products. And it's vacuum and pressurized, which means that it creates food of the quality that you might make at home. which if you're using big kettle cooking, you just don't have that. I mean, so many food producers find that when they go from home to then outsource manufacturing, all of a sudden their product tastes different. I was talking to a guy at Vegan Life Live who had lost great taste awards stars when he moved from making it himself to having it manufactured. And, he was really disappointed in that and saying, well, that's inevitable. So we've invested in a piece of kit which doesn't make that inevitable. And not only do we want to work with others because we've got the time and the kit, that's quite an exciting prospect to be able to offer other people the opportunity to maintain the quality that they've achieved at home, but be able to do it at scale, as long as it's plant-based and gluten-free. Well, we'd be happy to talk to anyone. So we're talking to some sauce makers, we're talking to pudding firm, and we're also talking to another brand who are going to start white labeling some of the products we already make, with some slight adjustments to the recipe, because that's for a community of people who are want quite high protein and low sugar products. So so what do we think we can offer is a lot of flexibility, really, as well as access to a quality piece of kit and the ability to make actually quite small batches for a contract manufacturing environment. Because I do know that when we were looking, even though we weren't doing it terribly sensibly, the number of units that were required, even for chilled, was sort of, I remember 8,000 or 9,000 at the time when we were, over the moon if we sold 800 or 900 in a run. So there's just no way we could have done that. But we think we can help plug that sort of middle ground for people.
Yeah, perfect. Sounds really exciting. I think with the high shear, trying to get that smooth cashew finish as well, that's something that, if the kit's too big or it's not the right piece of kit, it can definitely affect the quality massively.
Yeah.
Cool. What are your plans for the kind of future of Oregon Kitchen? I know we've kind of just really covered that a little bit.
So not only do we want to sort of get into the malts and become a national brand, we want to build out the range so that Origin Kitchen always stands for plant-based, natural and quality, but with a sort of under that, then there are different ranges. So we've got the cream cashew range, which is going to be rebranded as So Creamy. Then we think there's a space for some natural superfood products. High protein is a really big trend at the moment, but lots of high protein products are made with protein isolates added into them. So they sort of taste slightly weird, and they don't particularly feel natural. And we think there's an area there using nuts and seeds where we could do a high protein but natural product. So that's an area we want to look at. We think that there's an area for more development in ready-to-go drinks. So that's an area we're going to look at. So what we're hoping is in the sort of 10 to 15 years, there'll be Origin Kitchen will be a trusted UK brand that people know Origin Kitchen products are going to be natural, healthy, and premium.
Awesome. Sounds super exciting. So I guess last kind of question, what's the most important things you've learned from kind of concept to launch of the product and just the whole process in starting up the business? And is there anything you wish you could go back and tell yourself at the beginning of the process?
Very unglamorous, but it's managing the costs. There are so many hidden costs, and everything costs at least 4 times what you thought it was going to cost. And therefore, I'd say making sure that making sure that you understand what those costs are and how you're going to cover them, because it's not just, can I afford the cost of what we're doing today? As you scale, obviously those costs scale with you. And so therefore the cash flow requirement, scales along with that. And, you can end up in a situation where you're expanding, but all the revenue that's coming in is then going to pay for this or that or the next thing. And so you've got to be really careful. to be realistic about that. And the temptation to undercharge is, is very real. And just try and avoid it if you can, because the big brands can fight it out on price. Little brands have got to fight it out on quality, or whatever, uniqueness, or whatever it is. So yeah, I'd say just be very, very, very mindful of the costs.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Leah. That's been very, very insightful. I think we will wrap it up.
Thank you.
I hope everyone has a great weekend.
To listen to other episodes or subscribe in your favourite podcast player, go to www.froghop.co.uk/podcast or search for Food Founders Interviews wherever you get your podcast from.